Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, to the channel IT Simplified. Hope you're having good time with your family and friends and liking these sessions. In today's video, I'm here to discuss Azure Virtual Desktop deployment on Azure Stack HCI. Before I start, I've noticed that 70% of the people who are watching these videos regularly are not subscribed to the channel. If you find value from these sessions, consider subscribing, as this will help grow the channel. So let's start, and I'm going to break this down for the people who may or may not be aware of AVD or Azure Stack HCI. Let's start with some basic. So what is Azure Stack HCI? It's nothing but a cluster of nodes. You can have multiple nodes that you're going to deploy on-prem, right? Now these nodes can be procured from any of the vendors, preferred vendors from Microsoft. Let's say, for example, Dell, HP, Lenovo, or you can repurpose your own hardware. Now there is specific requirements, obviously, what configuration is needed, but both these options are available. If you get from any of the preferred vendors, then it comes already pre-deployed with the operating system. If you're going to use your own hardware and you're going to repurpose this as Azure Stack HCI, then you need to go and deploy the operating system on that, which is typically 23H2 minimum version, right? That's what Azure Stack HCI is. And Azure Virtual Desktop, which so far was a service within public cloud, which is Microsoft Azure, which allows you to access applications or even full desktop remotely. You can access from anywhere. Now, with this change, what is happening is you can deploy these services in your own data center and deploy Azure Virtual Desktop, these remote desktop services, which is a modern way of remoting into your application and access computers, but that will be deployed on the nodes that I talked about, right? So these are the nodes, which is Azure Stack HCI nodes. It can be a combination of two, and you can add up to, I think, 16 nodes. But you can check on the documentation what is the minimum and the max nodes that you can add. Hopefully, that is clear about Azure Stack HCI and AVD. Now, the question arises why Microsoft is bringing this service. So, let's look at some of the benefits that we can avail by utilizing this service. So, number one is obviously improved performance. So, otherwise, in a previous scenario, which I said that these services are running in the cloud, obviously you need to have a good connectivity in order to access. But people who don't have good internet connectivity and they still want to utilize AVD, that's a great case scenario because it is sitting in your own data center, and you'll have better access for your users who will be accessing these applications. So it's better performance. So definitely that's going to be number one case scenario. Other case scenario is data residency. We still come across a lot of customers who are not still ready to deploy these services or their data in cloud or in public cloud. This can be because of the compliance reason or because of obviously from the performance reasons also. With data residency, in case you are concerned about that, you can have your session host, which is nothing but the machines in which these applications will be deployed, will be locally in your own data center. So the data is not leaving your geographical boundary or your own data center. Now, specifically when we talk about any cloud services, there are different kind of data, right? There's customer input data. Right now, when you configure AVD services, typically you need to configure certain objects. Like, for example, you need to give the name for the host pool. You need to create an application group, right? And maybe you need to create a workspace. Now, these are all different objects that you need to create. But the main thing is your session host. Now, the session host will be, let me use a different color here. These session hosts will be on these boxes on nodes or cluster of nodes. That's where the data is sitting. So that's not leaving your own data center. So people who are concerned about data residency, they can be rest assured that that is there in their own data center. The only customer input data like name and everything may be optional if you want to create maybe diagnostic logs or service data. I think diagnostic log is optional, but service data, that is to make sure that the service is up and running. These are some of the things, but your actual data, which is there on these session host or even the file share that you create for saving your user profiles, that's going to remain within your data center, right? Now, other benefit that I see, obviously, it has to do with the performance. I'm going to add there's something what you call RDP short path. Now, typically, when you access as a client your session host within the host pool, Microsoft is using something what you call reverse connect, right? You might have heard about it, reverse connect. Now, reverse connect is based on TCP protocol. Now, what is happening is that the AVD clients, it creates an outbound connection to through the client to the gateway and to make it secure. But the disadvantage is that because it is using TCP protocol, it can lead to higher latency. Now, with RDP short path, you can create a direct connection to session host. And this uses UDP protocol. And because it is using UDP protocol, the connection is more faster. So if you're dealing with a user who wants to obviously low latency, then this is a great way of doing it, right? You can configure this, and this is based on port 3390. So these are all some of the benefits that I see by utilizing AVD on Azure Stack HCI. Now, what are some of the things that you need to keep in mind with the deployment and configuration? So remember, I talked about the nodes on the Azure Stack HCI, which is a cluster of nodes that you're going to put in your on-prem data center. It can be from any of these vendors, or you can repurpose this. The uh, the the nodes that will be running should have a minimum version. The operating system version should be 23H2, and you need to register these nodes with Azure. And I'm going to come to the cost and everything, but you need to register those nodes to the Azure service. Even if you're registering, as I said, the data is still going to remain. Your main applications, your session host within the host pool, going to remain, but you need to register. This is one of the prerequisites that you need to have. Now, other thing that you need to have from the deployment perspective is, as you know, in public cloud in Azure, if you go and deploy AVD, you can join this to Entra ID. You can join this to obviously Active Directory domain services, or even to Azure Active Directory domain services. But when we talk about specifically about the Azure Stack HCI, you can only use Active Directory domain services. It means you need to deploy a domain controller, right? That's one of the things that you need to keep in mind. Other thing is that the machines or the session hosts that will be part of the host pool, they need to have the connected agent. Actually, that will be get deployed by default once you register your Azure Stack HCI with the Azure service or AVD service. This agent will automatically get deployed. But these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind, that the node should be running on the latest operating system, which is 23H2. The machines or the session host in the host pool will be Active Directory domain services joined. So you need to have a domain controller, and you need to have a connected agent as part of this deployment. Now, other thing that might be confusing for a lot of people is the licensing here, the pricing. Now, when it comes to pricing, from the licensing perspective, you need to have the same prerequisite for the licensing that you need. So it means that you need to have either business premium, E3, E5. Some of the academic licensing is I think, is also there, but you can check. But those licensing, which is based on per user, remains same, right? So that doesn't change. So you need to have that. Now, on top of that, there is something what you call HCI, Azure Stack HCI service fee, which is based on per physical core per month. And this is obviously based on the currency that you're utilizing. But if I have to pick the USD, it is going to be $10 per physical core per month. That's going to be another fee on top of the licensing. And then you also need to have an AVD fee on Stack HCI. Now, this fee is going to start from 1st of April, right? And this is, if I remember correctly, it's based on virtual core per hour, which is 0.014 per hour. So the licensing prerequisite that remains same, right? As I said, you need to have based on, so let's say if you have 15 users that you want to give access, you need to have those 15 licensing, any of those, which you can check. Then there's going to be a service fee because you need to register that cluster to Azure, and based on how many physical cores, it's going to be $10 USD in that case. And then there's an AVD fee on Stack HCI, which is going to start from 1st of April, which is 0.014 per hour per virtual core that you're going to have, right? So something that you need to remember. Now, along with this, there is also certain limitations, because obviously we are restricted to the on-prem data center or onto the hardware. There's going to be some restrictions. So first restriction, as I said, as I mentioned, it needs to be Active Directory joined, right? It cannot be Entra ID joined, so you can deploy your own data center. Some services like Start VM1 Connect are not there. You don't have this option of auto scaling. Like when you go and deploy your machines in Azure, in the AVD services, you can configure auto scaling, so that option is not there. And then also, from maybe from the cost perspective and from the licensing perspective, within Azure, you have this also an option of for external users, the people who are not part of your organization, you can enable something what you call per user access pricing. So that option is also not there, right? So these are, I would say, some of the limitation. And another thing is that you cannot mix and match. Let's say I have AVD services running in Azure. I also have an Azure Stack HCI and have AVD enable. I cannot have the session host, which can be part of both the host pool, right? It can be either part of Stack HCI or part of AVD in Azure. You cannot have across both of them. So these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. But if I have to take the takeaways from this, what is the major use case scenario? I will say I'm going to go to the benefits option here, and definitely going to give you improved performance. You can make use of the RDP short path, data residency. People who are concerned about not keeping the data in public cloud for the compliance reason or for some any other reason, that's a great scenario because it's going to stay within, and then you can still utilize this service. And you get the flexibility of using preferred vendor, or you can repurpose your hardware. So that's another flexibility. But these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind in case you're going to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI. Hopefully, this was helpful. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.